Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for today's webinar on the application for consent to import, supply or export a medical device non-compliant with the essential principles. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I would like to extend that acknowledgement and respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here with us online today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Fuller, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Post-Market Reforms and Review section in the Medical Device Surveillance Branch of the Therapeutic Goods Administration. So thank you for joining us today to discuss the application process for consent to import, supply or export medical devices that are non-compliant with the essential principles. As this is a bit of a mouthful, from here on in, I'll just refer to this as the consent application form. This online form is integrated with your TGA Electronic Business Systems account, or TBIS as we call it, and the TGA Post-Market Compliance System. And this is the form that we'll be discussing in today's webinar. So today's webinar will be divided into a few parts. We will go through some introductory slides and then a live demonstration of the form in TBIS. Any remaining time will be dedicated to a question and answer session. The topics covered by the webinar today will be a brief introduction on why and when you may need to apply for consent, how and where to apply for consent, and what the form looks like, and what the TGA expectations are in regard to the information that you will need to provide. And then I'll touch on the process after you submit the application form, including the payment of fees. So let's begin with a bit of background. The reason that you need to apply for consent to import, supply or export medical devices that are non-compliant with the essential principles is because there are criminal offences under Section 41MA and civil penalties under Section 41MAA of the Therapeutic Goods Act if you supply non-compliant medical devices unless consent has been granted by the Secretary of the Department of Health and Aged Care. Whilst the TGA expects and requires compliance with the essential principles, there may be some extenuating circumstances preventing compliance to one or more parts of an essential principle for a limited period of time. If this is the case, then you can apply for consent to import, export, or supply the medical devices, even though there are some non-compliances. The TGA will review the risk of supplying the non-compliant medical devices with consideration to the risk mitigation strategies that the sponsor or manufacturer are going to put in place for this period of time. It should be noted that if your non-compliant medical device is currently part of an application to vary the device or manufacturer's evidence, or you have an application for inclusion in the ARTG and the device is going to be supplied whilst non-compliant with the essential principles, you will still need to apply for consent. So if you're seeking consent for non-compliant devices, an authorised representative of the sponsor needs to complete and submit the consent application form, which is hosted on the TGA Business Services site. A link to this can be found on the TGA's Essential Principles Consent for Non-Compliance webpage. This webpage also provides you with a copy of the guidance document on how to complete the application form. In the application, you'll need to upload or include all relevant documentation, such as the risk mitigation strategy and the implementation plan, and then pay the applicable processing fees in full. The delegate of the Secretary will take all relevant information into consideration when determining whether to grant consent, and then a notification will be sent to the sponsor advising of the outcome. The Consent for Non-Compliance application form is hosted on the TGA Business Services site, or TBIS as we call it. You log in as you would normally for any other applications or adverse event reporting, and then under the Applications drop-down menu, select the Medical Device Post-Market Compliance option under the Regulatory Compliance heading. This will take you to the PMR Compliance dashboard where you can select the Consent for Non-Compliance Applications tile to access the next dashboard and start a new application. So now I would like to show you the application form in TBIS and actually take you through the process of submitting an application. So on the Consent for Non-Compliance dashboard, you have the option of 3 different views. You can choose Draft Consent Applications, Submitted Applications, and Notifications related to your consent application. If we choose draft, here you can see all the consent applications to be able to review or edit these applications that are still in draft and not yet submitted by your organisation. You can choose the submitted consent applications to view details of consent applications previously submitted by your organisation. Or you can select the Notifications tab to view any notifications related to a submitted consent application. So let's have a little bit more of a look at the draft applications. So here we have all the draft applications, which are applications that have been created but not yet submitted. They are sorted here by their reference number, their title, and the date that they were created on. So you can see that we have a little bit of information for each of these draft applications. The first information here is the reference number. Now, this is a unique identifying number for this particular application, and this is created when you create the application. And this reference number, or the CTS ID number, is the number that you will need to quote when undertaking any correspondence with the TGA regarding this particular application. You can sort this table by clicking on the reference number column header, and this will sort this table in numerical order. Here you can see we've got the title of the application, and this is the title that you give the application when you create it. Once again, you can also sort this table by clicking on the title column header, and this will order them in alphabetical order. We also have here the date that the application was created and the date that it was last modified. And you can also sort by clicking on either of these column headings, and they will sort them in ascending or descending order. Now, because these applications are in draft, they can be edited multiple times, and that's why we've got a column here for the date that it was last modified. These draft applications may have partial information, or they might have the complete information, but they're just not yet submitted. And hence, this will let you know the last time somebody has edited or modified this draft application. Now, you can also use the search function to search for an application on any view by typing in the application reference number or name into the search box and pressing the magnifying glass. You can also do a partial search using the asterisk as a wildcard character and typing in part of the name or a number. Let's say, for example, I want to have a look at one of my applications that is relevant to PICS. I can't remember the entire title, but I know it's got PIC in the title. So I simply type in the asterisk and then PIC, and then I select the magnifying glass. What that will do, it will bring up any of these draft applications that have PIC in the title. So it's brought this one up here. And from here, I can go on to do certain things with it. But let's just go back to our draft table. And you'll notice that all these draft applications have drop-down menus here. So let's have a look at some of the options here. As you can see, we've got Edit, Preview, and Delete. The Edit button is used to go in and review and edit any of the details in your draft application. So let's say, for example, you want to go back and change some of the information that you've previously put in, or the draft application is not yet completed and you need to go in and finish the application, or it's completed but you want to submit it. You would simply select Edit, it will bring up the form, and you'll be able to continue and then press Submit. And we'll be showing you this as we go through a new application. The next option here is Preview. And what this will do is it will bring up this draft application in a one-page format with the information that's been entered so far. And from here, you can print or save to a PDF. Once again, I'll be showing you this function when we go through and create an application. And the last option here is to delete. So you can actually delete a draft application. Let's say you draft an application, but then decide that you actually don't need this consent for these particular devices. And so before you submit it, you can actually delete it. And what will happen is this will delete it from your dashboard completely. If you do want to delete, you simply select delete, and it will bring a pop-up box to prompt you to make sure that you want to delete. This is because once you delete a draft application, you are not able to retrieve it. So actually, I do not want to delete. I've changed my mind. I simply select cancel, and it brings me back here. what I'd like to do now is actually go through the process of applying for a consent. So what I'm going to do is just select the new application for consent tile there, and it will bring up a new screen where it's going to prompt us to provide a name for the application. You'll see here that there is a little red asterisk. This indicates that it is a mandatory field and we must provide the relevant information to be able to complete the form. So you can name your application anything that is relevant to you and something that will enable you to differentiate multiple applications over time. So say, for example, I want to call mine, say, pick and pills for cardiac implants. I just simply name that and select create. And what that will do is it will create this application in the background and assign us a CTS number and get the form ready for us to start filling in. Okay, great. So now you'll see that we've got all the form ready to fill in. The name that we gave it will appear up here in the top. And you'll also see that we've got a pop-up box to remind you to go and update your correspondence details in TBiz. This is really important that this is done regularly so that the TGA will correspond with the correct people. You'll see that there are different sections of the form here for us to fill in. We've got two different ways of viewing this. If you would like to expand all sections and see all the questions that we're going to go through for the form, you can select expand all. If you would like to just view one section at a time, you simply select collapse all and then open up one section at a time. So let's go ahead and fill in the application details. Here is our unique reference number for this particular application, and this was created when we press the new tile button. Here is the name that we've given it, and you can actually edit the name. So if you decide that that's not the right name and that we don't need the word implants here, we can just write pick and pills cardiac. We can change that however you want. You can see here that it lists the sponsor that is associated with your profile. And the next question is asking us what we're actually seeking consent for our devices to be: imported, exported, or supplied. Now, you need to select at least one of these options, but you may select two or more. You can select all three if it's relevant. So the important thing here is to select the options that are relevant to this application. You simply select them by clicking in the box. You can select it again to unclick it if you've made a mistake, but you must select at least one. So I'm going to go ahead and select all three because I'd like to import, export, and supply my non-compliant devices. The next question is about the devices that are going to be part of this application. So are these for devices that are included in the ARTG already, or perhaps they're devices that are part of an application for inclusion? Once again, you must select at least one option, but you can select both if that's relevant to the application. So for me, I'm going to have some ARTGs, but also I would like to seek consent for a device that is part of an application for inclusion. So I've selected both. The next question is about why these devices are not conforming to the essential principles. Here we click on the drop down button and you can see we've got a few options already here for us. Is this a result of the EU MDR implementation? Is it a result of the EU IVDR implementation? Is this a result of the Australian regulation changes or other? If we select other, it will open up a box here for us to give an explanation as to what the reason is for the non-conformance. So you just need to type your explanation here in the box, keeping in mind that this is a mandatory field. The next question is, what are the real or potential risks associated with non-conformance if the non-conforming devices were to be imported, exported, or supplied? Now here we've got two ways of supplying the information and answering this question. One is that you could type your explanation in the box provided, or if you would like to, if you've got a document that explains this well, you can upload that here. When we're uploading documents, it's important to keep in mind that we can accept Word, PDF, Excel documents, and anything with a file size up to 50 megabytes. Now I'm going to upload a document here, but you'll notice that this is a mandatory field. So if we're going to provide a document, we need to write something in the box here. I'm going to write document attached, and that will prompt the staff that are reviewing this to know that there is a document attached. Now here, we should really be able to see a folder in which for us to select. If you don't see a folder appear here automatically, that just means that SharePoint hasn't had time to create these folders. We simply go down and save the work that we've done and let that save. And what that will do, will refresh the form and these will appear. We simply go back into our application details and you'll see now that we have a folder to be able to put our supporting documents in. So I do want to attach a document here. So I'm going to select the folder for my supporting document and select the Add Files button. When I do this, a new window will open in the current view for me to be able to choose the files. I simply click in the Choose Files box, and this will bring up my Explorer for me to navigate to the correct form, document, and select it. So I'm going to select my document, select the Add Files button, and you can see here that it has added my document here. Now, if I add the wrong document or I would like to add an updated document, I can also replace this document with another one. So let's say, for example, oh, I've attached the wrong document. I simply click on the down arrow button here and choose delete. And what this will do is it will delete the file so I can go in and replace it. A pop-up box will appear here for me to confirm that I do want to delete that file, and I simply delete it and go again. So now I'm going to select my Choose Files box, select the other document, so the updated or correct document. I select Add Files, and you can see here that this document is now there. Okay, so this is all the application details are filled in. You'll notice that everything here has gone from amber to green, and this means that I have provided all the mandatory information in this section. From here, I can select Save, which will save all the information, and I can leave this application in draft and return to it at another time, or I can continue filling out the next sections to work my way through the form. So let's do that. So the next section is the non-compliant essential principles. And this is where you're going to identify all the essential principles that the devices are non-compliant with. And we do that by selecting one EP at a time and providing details as to why the devices are non-compliant with each of the EPs. So to add an EP, I simply select the Add Breached Essential Principles button, and I select the essential principle. If I click on the down arrow button here, all of the EPs will appear in numerical order. So you may need to scroll through to find the right EP. So for this one, I've said that these are for picks and pills. So I'm going to scroll through and choose 18A2. I simply select the EP that my devices are non-compliant with and provide an explanation for how the devices are non-compliant with this selected EP. You can see here that this is a mandatory field and you must provide an explanation as to what, how these are not compliant. Once you've provided that explanation, you simply select Save and Close. And this will add this information to our table here. So you can see it has added our EP, and it's also provided the summary of the as to how the devices do not conform. Now I need to add another breached essential principle because mine are non-compliant with both picks and pills. So you can simply add more EPs, non-compliant EPs, provide your explanation, and then select Save and Close. So now we've got our two EPs. Now, if you realize that you want to provide a bit of a different explanation, you can simply choose the down arrow button here and select Edit. That will open it back up for you to make changes. You can change the EP, you can change the information given in the summary box. If you would like to delete this EP altogether, you can also select Delete and it will delete it completely from this table. But I'm happy with those EPs, so I'm going to leave them there. So once again, you can see that this accordion has turned green, meaning that I've provided all relevant information in the mandatory fields. So once again, I can select save to save the information that I've completed so far, and I can leave this in draft to complete it another time, or I can continue filling in the form. So let's continue. The next information that we're going to fill in is around device groups. So you can group your devices within a consent application. For example, if you have 20 devices that are non-compliant with the chosen EPs, and 5 of those devices have the same proposed consent period, so the same proposed start and end dates, and the same implementation plan, then they can be grouped together into one device group. The remaining 15 devices can also be grouped by devices with the same implementation plan and proposed consent period. You must have at least one device group in your application, and a device group must have at least one device in it. You can have as many groups as you like within an application. Please note, however, that a device can only be part of one group within an application. This means that you cannot have the same device in 2 or more groups within the application. So let's go ahead and add a device group. You do this by selecting the Add Device Group tile. This will bring up a box for you to provide a name for this group. Once again, you just need to provide a name that is relevant for you and which will help you to discern one group from another. Once you've provided the name, you simply select Save and Close, and this will create the group for us. Okay, so you can see that the group name is now populated into my table, but I haven't got any devices in there yet, and I haven't got any dates in there. And you can see here that this group data completed column says no, because I have yet to complete the information, and you can see that the accordion is still amber. So to go in and add these details, I simply select the down arrow button here and choose Edit. Doing so will bring open a new box for us to add these details. Now, if I decide that the name that I gave it, I'd like to change it because it wasn't quite right, I can change the name here. You'll notice that there's a validation error here. This will appear until you've got at least one device in your group. So at least one ARTG or application for inclusion, depending on what you selected at the beginning of the form. So I'm going to go ahead and add some devices. You'll notice that I selected that I have ARTGs plus I have an application for inclusion as part of my group, and I actually want to group them all in this device group. So to add an ARTG, I select the Add ARTG button, and this will bring up another window in the current view for you to select the ARTGs. So all the ARTGs that are associated with you, your sponsor, will appear here in the table for you to be able to select. So you can select multiple. You can also use the search bar to search for an ARTG via the ARTG number or name or class. And you can also do a partial search again by typing in the asterisk wildcard character and then part of the number or name, so forth. But I'm going to add these 4 ARTGs into my group. So once I've selected these, I then press the Add button. And these ARTGs will be added to my group. Okay, so now you can see that these 4 ARTGs have been added. Got the number, the name, and the class. Now, if I made a mistake and I didn't actually mean to include this first one, I simply select the down arrow button to the right-hand side and I can remove this ARTG. A window will come up prompting you to make sure that you want to remove this ARTG, which I am, and I simply remove it by pressing that button. The table will update to show that this device has been removed. And now I want to add an application for inclusion and go forward to provide some stock level information. So to add an application for inclusion, I select the Add Application for Inclusion button. This new window will appear where I can provide the application number, which might look something a little bit like this, and the device name. Both of those are mandatory fields as indicated by the red asterisks. Once I've done that, I select Save and Close, and it will add this application for inclusion into my device group. So you can see now that this device group table has all our devices in it. We've got our 3 ARTGs and that device, that application for inclusion that I just included. It's got the name, and it's also got some columns here for future and current stock level. Now, you can see that there's nothing populated, and these fields are not mandatory. However, providing stock level information will provide extra information to the TGA to support your application. So in order to do this, we do this by ARTG, and we do this by simply selecting the down arrow button and selecting edit, and then this will open up another box for us to provide the stock level information. So you can see the ARTG name is at the top, and we can fill in the stock level information. So here you can fill in the current stock level. Please note that these are numerical values only and whole numbers. If you don't do whole numbers, you'll get an error message. And the future stock levels. And here you can nominate what the stock level units of measurement are. So whether that's a box, each, other, or pack. If I select other, the next thing asks us to specify how many devices are in the units that we've selected. So let's say, for example, that these come in packs of 2. I can simply write 2 here. The next question is about the expected depletion date of the stock, including the current and future stock. And this is a calendar date. To fill this in, we simply select the calendar icon on the right and choose the date that we expect that the stock will be depleted. The next question is, will there be any supply shortage if the consent to supply is not granted? We can choose yes, no, or unsure, and provide an explanation to that question. So here you can explain how there'll be a stock shortage. The next question is whether there'd be any additional impacts to the Australian consumers if the consent is not approved. Once again, we click on the down arrow button and we select yes, no, or unsure. So here I'm going to say, yes, there will be an additional impact to the Australian consumers, and I need to provide an explanation as to why that might be. Okay, so now I've provided all my stock level information for that particular ARTG. I select the Save and Close button, and you can see now that that stock level information has populated in the table here. So from here, you can go through and select edit, and you can go through and add stock level information for any or all of your devices in this device group. Once you've done that, we've got to now complete what our proposed consent duration is. And you can see that these are mandatory fields, unlike the stock level information. So for this particular group, I need to nominate the start date. I do this by clicking on the calendar icon and selecting the date for which I would like to seek consent. So I would like to seek consent from about the middle of November, and now I need to choose when the end of the consent period is. So please be aware that the end date must be within 3 years of the proposed start date, but usually the TGA will grant consent for periods of up to 2 years and 3 years in extenuating circumstances. So I only need consent for a year. So I just click through to that period and choose the select the end date there. Here I need to provide a reason as to why I have chosen that duration of consent and those dates. After I've done that, I've got the opportunity to provide information on batches. If you are seeking consent for a longer period of time, batch information might not be relevant to your device group. If, however, you are seeking consent for a relatively short period of time, it might be relevant for you to actually add some information about the batches that are going to be affected. Okay, so now that we've done our proposed start and end date, now we're going to look at what strategies we have in place to rectify this non-compliance for this particular device group. Same with before, we have an option to provide an explanation in the box provided, or we can upload some documents. If we're going to upload documents, we do need to write something in this box. So we can write document attached because this is a mandatory field. So I am going to attach a couple of documents here. So I've written document attached in the box provided. Now here you can see we've got some folders for you to upload your supporting documents to. So now I'm going to upload the implementation plan for this particular device group. I do that by simply selecting the folder into which I would like to upload the document. and then selecting the Add Files button. Once again, this will bring up this window for me to click in the Choose Files box. Select the document. So here I'm going to upload my implementation plan. Press the Add Files button. And you can see here that my implementation plan has been uploaded. To go back to the main folders, I simply select the Up To link, and that will come back up a level into the main folders. Because mine are to do with picks and pills, I also want to upload my interim pick. So to do that, I simply click on the pick folder and just follow the same process. Click in the Choose Files box, choose the correct file, which might be my interim pick. Select the Add Files button, and you can see it's put in there. To go back up to the folders, I simply select the Up, and I can go through and add a pill document as well. Once you're happy, just want to point out too, sorry, that if you've made a mistake, you can also go back in and delete the files as well. You've got an option to delete and replace if you want to upload a more updated document, or you've uploaded the wrong document. But I'm happy with all these documents that I've uploaded. So now I'm going to save and close this information. You would have noticed now that my device group section here has turned green, and that means that I have got all the mandatory information for at least one group in here. You can see that the devices, the ARTGs, and my application for inclusion devices are listed here. I've got my proposed start and end dates, and I've got a yes to the group data completed column, meaning that I have provided all these details. To add another device group, because many applications will have more than one device group, I just go through the process again. I select Add Device Group and just go through the same thing. Here you can see that you can edit your device group prior to submission. So while you're still drafting, you can edit that group, or if you just want to get rid of that group completely, you can also select Delete. But I'm happy with my group and I want to continue on. So at this point, I can save my information, which will save the form and all the information that I've provided so far, to go back and leave and then come back at another time, or I can go ahead and continue to submit it. So the last bit of the form is the declaration, and that is what we need to declare before we submit the form. It's important to note that only people with submitter access in TBiz will be able to click the declaration and submit the form. If you have drafter access, you are able to draft the form all the way up to this point, but you just won't be able to do the declaration and submit it. So if you were the drafter, you would save all this information and then it will appear on the draft view, and you can get someone with submitter access to come in and check the form and declare it and submit it later. But I have submitter access and I would like to submit this form, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. To do this, I simply read the declaration. It's very important to make sure that you read it. So I declare that the information provided in this application is true and correct, and I understand that providing false or misleading information is an offence. You can see here that this is a mandatory field. I simply tick that I agree with that declaration, and you would have noticed that the submit button has now come up. I would like to submit it, so I simply select submit. And what that's going to do is that is going to submit the form and send all the details through to the TGA. So I'm just going to let that submit. And you can see it's brought me back to the consent for non-compliance dashboard in the submitted view. And you can see here that my application is now submitted. So I've got my unique reference number. There's that title that we gave it. It's showing that it's submitted, what date I created it on and modified it, and the submitter, so who submitted it. So from here, we've got a few options. Let's say you have just submitted it and you'd like to view the details. You can select View Details. This will bring up the submitted application in a similar form to how we filled it out, but it will be non-editable. Because you've submitted it, you can no longer go in and change any of the information. If you'd like to print it, we can select the Preview option. So let's just do that so you can have a look. So here, all the different information that we've just entered will appear. in this format. So you can see I've got the application details, the non-compliant essential principles, information about the different device groups, the name, all the information there, right through to the consent duration of that group and the declaration that I've ticked it. You'll notice that there is a print button at the top for me to be able to save as a PDF or send to a printer to print. So I don't need to print today. And to get back to the view, I can either select this link up here or I can select the back button at the bottom. So if I select the back button, this takes me back to the dashboard. Now note that it's taken me back to the draft view. This is the default view when we go to the home screen. So if you want to get back onto the submitted view, you just need to simply select that tab and it will bring us back there. One of the other things I just want to point out is the status. So you can see here that this status is submitted. So that means that I've submitted the form, but I've not yet paid the fees. The different statuses can be submitted. So like I mentioned, that's been submitted, but the fees have not yet been paid. Once I pay the fees and the TGA starts reviewing the application, this status will change to review. Once an application is approved and a notification is sent, you'll see that the application status will change to approved or not approved, depending on, of course, whether it was approved or not approved. Two other statuses can appear here. One is expired, and that is for applications where the consent period has actually passed. They will have a status that will appear as expired. And the last one is revoked. So at any time, if the TGA revokes consent, the status of your application will appear as revoked. The other last thing I want to show you, so we've looked at preview, is that for any submitted applications, prior to them being approved or not approved, can be withdrawn. So let's say, for example, you submitted the application, but you've decided you don't need it anymore, you can withdraw this application. Do note, however, if you decide to withdraw an application, but you have already paid the application fees, that they are non-refundable and yeah, you will not be able to get a refund for that. So let's say we want to withdraw this application. We simply select withdraw. This will bring up the reference number of the application that you're wishing to withdraw. And here you just must provide a reason for why you would like to withdraw this application. And this will give an explanation to the TGA as to why you've changed your mind. And then to complete that, you simply select withdraw. But I don't want to withdraw that. I just wanted to show you. I will just close out of there. Okay, so this completes our live demonstration, and I'd like to return to our presentation to discuss fees. Okay, so now that you've submitted the application form, you'll need to pay the application fees. Application for consent cannot be processed until all relevant fees have been paid in full. The current fees for applications for consent to supply apply to each ARTG entry and application for inclusion included in an application. The fees are $500 for the first ARTG entry or application for inclusion, and then $100 for each subsequent ARTG entry or application for inclusion within the application for consent. So say, for example, if your application for consent has 55 ARTG entries, $500 is applied to the first ARTG entry and then $100 to each of the remaining 54 ARTG entries, which equates to the application for consent costing a total of $5,900. Consent to supply that only relates to non-compliant patient information materials, EP13A, that has a different risk profile, assessment and follow-up when compared to consent applications relating to other essential principles. On the 29th of October last year, amendments to the therapeutic goods regulations came into effect, providing reduced fees for applications for consent to import, supply, or export devices non-compliant with EP13A. The fees for these applications is a flat fee of $30 for each ARTG entry or application for inclusion. This means that for an application for consent solely related with non-compliance to EP13A, where there are 55 ARTG entries, the total cost would be $1,650. In addition, you may have heard that on the 29th of September this year, amendments were made to the therapeutic goods regulations, which came into effect to introduce a fee concession to reduce the regulatory costs for sponsors of ARTG entries supported by EU MDD, IVDD certifications who are transitioning to the EU MDR, IVDR, and seeking consent to import, supply, or export their devices where they do not have compliant information to be provided with their medical devices, which is EP13. In these cases, the application fee for consent has also been reduced to $30 per ARTG entry, where the application is solely in relation to non-compliance with EP13 due to the transitioning from EU MDD, IVDD to EU MDR, IVDR certification. So there are two ways to pay the applicable processing fees. One is an immediate payment where you have to calculate the total fees and pay immediately after completing and submitting the applications, or payment against an invoice. So if you require the TGA to raise an invoice for payment, you simply complete and submit your application for consent, and the TGA will raise and send the submitter an invoice for the processing fees. If you do wish to make an immediate payment, you need to calculate the total fees for your application based on the number of ARTG entries or applications for inclusion and the current fees as we've just described in the previous slide. You'll need to go to the TGA payment page, which is a B-point payment page for the TGA. In the bill of code, you'll need to choose option 9, exemption under S41MA device. Enter your client ID number in the box provided, and in the ARTG box, enter that CTS reference number for your application that you're wishing to pay the application fees for. Then you need to enter the total amount of fees to be paid in Australian dollars and select the payment method, and then simply follow the instructions to complete the credit card payment. Once the fees have been paid, the post-market team will review the application. If sufficient information or documents are provided in the application, you may be sent an additional information notification asking you to provide the missing information or some clarification on certain points. A notification with the consent to supply decision will be sent to the submitter. These notifications will be available on the notifications view that we showed you on the dashboard for you to view and respond to. If your consent application is approved, please note that during the consent period, you may be required to demonstrate evidence that you are following the approved implementation plan. Please be aware that consent may be revoked at any time if there is non-compliance with the approved implementation plan or if the implementation plan is audited and is deemed insufficient to mitigate the non-compliance. If there are any concerns regarding the implementation, you will of course be provided with an opportunity to amend the plan and address any concerns identified. At the end of the consent period, you will be required to submit evidence that all the devices are now compliant with the essential principles. Notifications related to applications for consent can now be viewed on the notifications view of the dashboard, which we showed you in the live demonstration. Notifications can include an informal request for additional information regarding a submitted application, letters advising of the outcome of an application submission, and any regulatory letters related to devices that are part of an approved consent application. We are hosting a webinar tomorrow to provide guidance on how to view and respond to notifications related to devices that are part of an application for consent. So please join us tomorrow to learn more about this new feature.
Catherine, when you're ready, if you can just pop your camera back on and introduce Deepti, and we'll go through some of the questions.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I'd like to introduce Deepti, who's a project officer in my team, and she has been instrumental in developing our application form there in TBiz. Deepti's going to ask some of the questions.
Right, if you're ready, Catherine.
Sure.
Okay, let's jump onto it, and I'm going to ask you the most popular question for the afternoon, which is, what is the review timeline for a consent application?
Sure, thanks, Deepti. So as I mentioned previously, the TGA is actually unable to process any application until all the relevant fees have been paid. So if you submit and you're waiting for the TGA to raise an invoice, I think the standard finance processing time is around 2 days. So as long as then you pay that as soon as you get that invoice, I personally would allow at least a week before the proposed consent date to allow the processing, and that's really around finance processing. Same thing in terms of when you make the payment. If you say make a bank transfer after 5 p.m., of course that won't appear in the TGA bank account until the following working day, bar one. So it depends on when you pay. So if you paid 5 p.m. on a Friday, that's not going to appear in the TGA bank account till the Tuesday, and we can't commence reviewing the application until all those have been paid. So generally it would take a few days to review an application once it's been paid. So I would allow at least a week. The more the better.
Sweet, thank you. The next question is, does this webinar content apply to a product where the MDD certificate expires and EU MDR certificate has not yet been issued?
Sure. Good question, and probably a timely question at the moment. So consent for non-compliance is granted for non-compliance with the essential principles and is not the correct pathway to apply for continued supply due to lapsing conformity assessment certification, so whether that's lapsed or become invalid. Further information on lapses in conformity assessment certificates can be found on the TGA website. The TGA Consultation Hub also hosts a notification form where sponsors can notify the TGA about lapsing or lapsed medical device conformity assessment certification.
Thank you, Catherine. The next question is, what do I do if a device that is part of an approved consent application is reclassified and as a result is issued a new ARTG entry or number?
Yep, sure. So sponsors with an approved consent application for an ARTG entry that's been reclassified should contact the TGA when they get their new ARTG number and contact us on mdconsent@health.gov.au, identifying the relevant consent application and ARTG entries with the old ARTG and entry and the new ARTG number. You do not need to reapply for consent. The TGA will provide you with an updated approval for the new ARTG entry for the same approved duration of time. So yes, please contact us and let us know on mdconsent@health.gov.au.
Thank you, Catherine. If the TGA approves consent, that includes an application for inclusion, will I need to inform the devices application section that has been approved, or will the consent approval be provided internally?
Sure. So if your consent application does have a device that is part of an application for inclusion, the TGA internal processes will take care of that. So you do not need to inform the devices application section of that. The team reviewing and processing the consent applications will do that as part of the normal TGA processes. So we'll ensure that the devices application section are informed of the consent application and the progress of that decision. So no, you do not need to. We will do it for you.
Sweet. There's another question. Do I get my fees back if I withdraw my application?
No. So if you withdraw your application, unfortunately, once the fees have been paid, you cannot receive a refund. They are non-refundable.
So if you mind, can I take another question? Is there a particular reason that the TGA has developed CTS form outside TBIS?
Well, the form is part of the compliance post-market database within TBIS. So actually, it's very similar to the post-market review database that a lot of sponsors are familiar with in regards to answering, receiving regulatory letters and responding to regulatory letters. So we've actually developed it within TBIS to do that.
That's right. Thank you, Catherine. Now
That
I'm going
seems to be all the questions at the moment. If there's any more, please feel free to send them through. We do have a few more minutes, but over to you, Catherine.
Yeah, sure. Just to let you know too, if you do, if we haven't answered any questions We will endeavour to get back to you via email. So, and also note that you can email us for any questions at mdconsent@health.gov.au. And also just a reminder that this webinar will be has been recorded and will be available on the TGA website in the coming weeks, but also that we have our guidance documents on the TGA website on that consent for non-compliance with essential principles. We've got the guidance document that will step you through step by step, completing the form, and we also have a guidance document for viewing and responding to notifications, which is what we'll be discussing in tomorrow's webinar. So if you can't make it tomorrow, don't fear, there is a guidance document on the website as well to walk you through that. And of course, if you have any questions after reading the guidance document and you still need help, please do email us at mdconsent@health.gov.au and one of the team will be happy to help. I think that's it. Thanks, Rachel.
Okay, well, we might wrap that up there. So as Catherine mentioned, this will be published on the TGA website in the coming weeks, and we have all your details, so we may even send you out a link identifying where that is located when it becomes available. So thank you, Catherine, for a very detailed live demonstration, and Dipti, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.